I am so excited to get to sew up this bag today. My day job has been very stressful lately, and so I really need to get to be in my sewing room, sewing up something pretty, creating something beautiful. This bag is going to fit that completely. Today I'm sewing up the Teagan tote. This is a pattern from Stitches by Christy. I'm using these beautiful fabrics from my little shindig. This is from her monthly fabric club subscription. With that subscription, you get 6 different prints. This will be 2 of them. You also get the custom tags that match perfectly. So I have this one. So these are 2 of the prints. This is a cotton woven, and I do have these interfaced. I'll probably choose to add a foam on my exterior after I have it pieced together, but I'm going to wait until I have the front and the back exteriors pieced before I do that. So the first thing I want to talk about is with Stitches by Christy patterns, there's almost always a lot of different options for creating. So you can kind of pick and choose how you want to do it. This is going to be the back of my bag. It's going to be a little bit more simpler than the front. If you are feeling like you want to make something pretty in a hurry, you can use this option to do the front and the back. You can also choose to make this bag all in one print, or you can choose to make the bottom one print and then the top 2 pieces a different print. There's a lot of different ways to play around to have a different looking bag each time. The hardest part was just deciding how I wanted it to look. I decided that I wanted the top and the bottom to be a matching print and then a middle contrast piece. For my front pieces, I'm going to be making a slip pocket, kind of a feature focus. This is all going to be in the middle of the bag. So it's going to be in this floral print. I'll still have the top and the bottom, that plaid contrast, but this is the hardest part for me, is to figure out your pieces. For this pattern, I'm going to try to do everything exactly in the order as she does it, the same way she does it. I'm going to try to not make any changes. If I do, it's just by accident. So let's go ahead and start sewing up this pattern and just have some fun creating a beautiful bag. As soon as I said in the video that I was not going to make any changes, I was going to do everything like the designer had said, I immediately realized I'd already lied. I did not mean to, but for the strap, she has her strap made with vinyl. On a domestic, I rarely sew vinyl, even though I can, I just don't enjoy it. So I wanted to still have a fun strap, so I did make a double strap. So you can see this is 2 separate pieces, but I'm not choosing to use vinyl. So for hers, the vinyl wrapped around the accent piece and it was a raw edge. You can't do that with a cotton woven, of course. So what I did was I cut 2 individual straps for each handle. One of them is a 4-inch wide, the other is a 3-inch wide. Then I just did a 4-way fold of them and clipped them together. I centered the accent piece, the smaller one, in the middle. And now I'm just going to sew down both of these edges. Now, since I'm doing this cotton woven and both of them are a 4-way fold, I chose not to add any interfacing. I definitely could have, it wouldn't have hurt it any. But after I sew this, if I feel like it's not feeling sturdy enough, I'll probably go back in and do 2 more rows of stitching just to make it feel a little bit sturdier. This handle looks gorgeous. I love the way it looks. I'll sew the other one off camera, but that is how I'm going to do the straps for this bag. The next thing I want to talk about is the connectors for that strap. So we are going to use 1-inch hardware on this bag. I'm using rectangular rings. We're going to have 4 in total, and I'm going to show you how I made these. I have 3 already made, and then I just had the 4th one prepped. I cut this connector using my pattern piece, and then I just drew a line down the middle. I did add interfacing on this one because I knew my hardware was kind of heavy and I wanted it to be able to kind of have some stand on its own instead of just flopping over. Now what I'll do is I'll just take those raw edges, fold them to that line I drew in the middle, and then I will top stitch down both sides of this connector. After you have your top stitching done, you will just slip on your connector. Fold it with the wrong sides together. So the sides with the seam, just fold that together. And then I'm just going to top stitch directly under the hardware just so it's kind of secured into place. Trim up your threads, and that is how you will make your connectors for the strap. Now it is time to start working on the front of the bag, specifically that main front pocket piece. I'm very excited to make this. I think it's going to be really cute. I'm doing my pocket kind of monochromatic, but you could use accent pieces. Specifically, this pocket piece could be an accent, your side pieces could be an accent. This could all be different colors, but mine will all be the same. First thing we'll do is we'll take this larger piece, that is our middle side number 2 pocket, and she even tells you it can be one exterior or one coordinating print. And I'm okay showing these pattern pieces because there's no measurements on them. I would not show pattern pieces if there was a measurement. So now I want to make sure that I have mine orientated the right way I want it to go. I think I want my print to go this way. I do. And I also want to add a tag, a woven tag at the top of mine. So I'm going to offset this just a slight bit because I want to lose the minimum amount of this tag. It is so pretty. I love it. I'm going to baste this tag real quick into place. So I just did a few stitches there just to make sure it wouldn't slip so much. And then I'm going to place this right sides together, matching up this short edge, and then I'm going to sew across here with the seam allowance given in the pattern. Now that I have that sewn together, I'm going to flip this out, just turn it through the side, and I'm going to open up the seam by pressing it flat. You could do it with the iron, I'm just going to do it with my fingers. And so typically when we have a pocket like this, we'll have this seam at the top, but what she tells us to do is to shift it down about an inch. So I'm going to get out my ruler and I'm going to shift this down, and then I will show you how that looks. I'm making sure that that seam is pressed open, and I'm even going to top stitch this down. I don't know if I got mine perfectly measured, but look how cute that looks. So just by rolling that seam, putting a tag there, I think it looks really cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to top stitch right above the seam because I have my seam allowance going up because I want my tag to lay flat. So I'm going to top stitch above the tag, and then I'm going to also top stitch across the top here just for an extra decorative touch. Both of my top stitching will be 1/8 of an inch away. Look at how beautiful that looks. It looks so adorable. I love it so much. Now the designer tells us we can cut along the bottom of this piece so that we don't have to worry about it shifting so much when we're doing our next steps. If you feel like you need to do that, you can. You could also just press it flat. I'm going to risk it being sewn onto this next piece without cutting it, but if it causes me problems, learn from my mistakes then. Now we're going to take our pocket accent piece. This piece could definitely be a contrasting print because what's going to happen is I'm going to lay it right here on the top, matching up the bottom and the sides, and this little bit is going to poke through. So this would be a great place if you wanted to have a little bit of color peeking through here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and baste this in place. This will leave my slip pocket here, but the sides and the bottom will be basted down. Now technically I really don't have to do this because in my next step I'm going to add the side pieces which would connect it anyway. But I'm just going to do it to be safe. So I'm just going to baste 1/8 of an inch around the sides and the bottom of these two pieces. Now that I have this piece completed, I'm going to take these two side pieces to attach them. This is going to end up making this front section for the middle the same as that plain back section that we're using. So it's just a different way of doing it. If you wanted, you could have this on the front and the back of your bag if you wanted an extra pocket and more decorative features. Just making sure that I have my flowers going in the way I want. This is the way it'll look. I'm going to go ahead and take one of my side pieces, place it right sides together with that pocket, and then just sew down this edge with the seam allowance given in the pattern just to connect these two pieces. I'm going to go ahead and flip this open, and I'm going to top stitch on this side, so that means the seam allowance will stay where it is, and I'll just lay this piece on top of it. I'll just top stitch 1/8 of an inch away. I'm going to take that other side piece and do the same thing. Place it right sides together with the middle pocket piece. Sew with that full seam allowance. And then I'll top stitch it as well. Here's how that middle looks for the front. I have this really adorable pocket here, and I have the top stitching that just makes it a really nice feature focus. Now that I have this front middle piece completed, what I want to do is I want to check it against that back middle piece just to make for sure they're the same size, no problems there. But before I add on the top, I have to add those connectors. The pattern tells us how far we measure in from the side. Go ahead and take one of your connector pieces, place it with the connector going down, and the pattern also tells you how much overhang you should have. clip that in place, and we're going to baste these two connectors into place. Now you're going to do these same steps for your back piece. I'll do all the back pieces off camera, so I will just show the construction of the front, but of course the back's going to be the exact same way. The only thing different is on the back I don't have all this pocket piece, and I'll be adding a cork tag instead of a woven tag there in the middle. Now that I have the connectors basted in place, it's time to add that top piece. You guys, if you're a perfectionist, are really going to struggle with me because my stripes aren't going to be perfect. Did I cut the pattern pieces correctly? Yes, I did. But with a woven material, sometimes things are kind of wavy or shift, especially with your interfacing. So this is the way I want it to go in the end. So once I have that orientation, then I can just flip it down so it's right sides together with that middle piece, matching up the long edge and the short edges on the sides. Add a few clips, and then you can just sew all the way across here with that seam allowance given in the pattern. Now once I have that sewn together, I'm going to flip up this top piece, but I'm also going to flip that seam allowance down, including these connectors. So when you do that, your connectors should pop up, and that is the way you want them to go. Now because those connectors are a little thick, you'll have to make sure that you're holding that seam down while you're sewing it. So because this seam is going down, we're actually going to be sewing on this middle piece, not the top piece, so that we're attaching that seam to that middle section. Just go ahead and do that stitching 1/8 of an inch away. When you come to your connectors, make sure it's down, make sure you're holding everything pressed open, so I keep my hands on it and I check it occasionally to make sure it's going the way I want. That looks so pretty. I love how it looks. Now the designer tells us we can add a rivet here. I think I'm going to do that, but I think I'm going to wait until I attach this to some foam. I'm really thinking I want to add foam to this because it feels really soft right now and I want it to have a good structure in the end. So I will do the rivets later, but now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that bottom piece. Go ahead and pull out that bottom piece with the notches at the bottom, and then flip it up the same way you did the top. Line it up on the sides and that long edge, and we're going to sew once again with the seam allowance given in the pattern. So now that we have this sewn, once again, we're going to have the seam allowance going to the bottom. On this one's going to be a little bit easier because all we need to do is lay this bottom piece down, and that seam is going to stay where it is, but that does mean that we will top stitch on this bottom piece as well. So my seam allowance is underneath the bottom. I'm top stitching on that bottom piece. I'll be checking it just like I did the top to make sure that seam does stay under. Just going 1/8 of an inch away across here as well. Here is how my front looks. I love it so much. It's beautiful. I'm going to complete the back the same way. I'm going to go off camera, add my foam, and I'm also going to see if I can find some rivets to place in my connectors. Now that we sewed the front and back exterior, let's go ahead and start working on the lining. We're going to add a zipper pocket to this side of the lining. The other side of the lining will kind of have to be constructed together. So for this one, you only cut one of these really big pieces. I went ahead and placed the zipper overlay. I cut this zipper overlay out of vinyl so it can be non-fraying. The vinyl is from My Little Shindig. This butterfly print is from Jane R. Edwards. It was from a couple years ago, I believe. But I placed the template down from the top according to the pattern measurements. It is centered. I used a little bit of glue to kind of hold it in place so it doesn't shift, and then I stuck a woven tag from Sewing Blurbs underneath. So the first thing I'll do is I'll sew around the exterior perimeter of this overlay. I sew about 1/8 of an inch away. You can knot your threads on the back, or you can backstitch, whatever's your preference. Once you have the perimeter sewn on the outside, then you can cut away the extra material on the inside. So to start that, I fold the lining piece in half, and then just use my scissors to start the opening. I open it back up, and what's best is if you can cut it from the wrong side, and make sure you go in between the overlay and the lining piece. So I go slow when I get it started just to make for sure I get my scissors in there, and then I can just kind of glide along. Cut about 1/4 of an inch away from my stitches. So that is how the overlay looks now. I'm going to set this aside while we work on the zipper and the lining pieces. So what I'll do is I'll have this lining pocket piece right sides up. I'll take my zipper tape and place it right sides up on top. And then I'll just sew all the way down to connect these two pieces. After I have the two pieces connected, I just separate them so that I'm looking at the wrong side of my lining, but the right side of my zipper tape, and then I just tack it down. This kind of helps it to stay open, so when I add it to my lining piece, it's just a little bit easier for me to sew. That is how it looks on that side. Let's flip it over. You can see on the other side when you open up your zipper, this is what you'll see. Grab out your other lining piece and place it so it's right sides up for your direction to make sure this is the top. Take that zipper and place the unsewn edge at the top, making sure your sides are matching up as well, and do those same steps. So this is how my zipper lining looks. I might be doing this a little bit different than the pattern, so definitely follow whichever set of instructions you prefer. So this is just the way that I do it, works best for me. Now that I have the lining pocket piece open, I just lay the main lining on top. I make sure I have it centered. And then I want my teeth to be right in the middle of this opening here. Once I have it to where it looks good, then I just take it over the machine and this time I sew 1/8 of an inch away on the inside perimeter of this overlay. Now that I have this overlay attached and the zipper lining pocket pieces attached, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this over and just pull down those lining pocket pieces so that they are right sides together. And I know for a fact I'm not going to try to birth this bag through this opening. I'm using foam, or I'm deciding to use foam, and I know this will be just too small. So I'll either do an opening in the bottom of the bag or I will do a drop-in lining. Depends on how I'm feeling at the moment. My hands struggle quite a bit with turning bags these days, and so definitely don't feel like turning it through the zipper pocket opening piece. I trimmed up the overhang at the bottom, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew down the sides and across the bottom to close up this zipper pocket piece. You can go ahead and trim up any overhang if you would like. That is how the first lining side of this bag looks. We're going to go ahead and get out the pieces to create the other side of the lining. I forgot to mention that on the other side, the lining that we just made the zipper pocket on, we still need to add the top to it. Just know that both sides of the lining do have the top piece, just like it did on the exterior. There's not a bottom piece because it's included in, but there is a top piece. So now I'm going to make the other side of the lining. We're going to have these two pieces that we're going to start with. On the first one, I added a woven tag here at the top, and I'll take it and I'll fold it so that it's right sides together, matching at that short edge. And then I'm going to sew with that seam allowance given in the pattern. We're basically doing those same steps we did on the exterior piece. So now we have this tube, and just like on the exterior, I'm going to do this pocket the same way. I'm going to press the seam flat, and then I'm going to turn it, and then I'm going to offset this top seam by about 1 inch. So now I have the seam going up, so I'll top stitch on this piece. That'll also help this tag to lay flat. So I'll top stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from that seam we just sewed, and then I'll also top stitch again across the top just to kind of help it lay flat. Here's how this piece looks. Now pull out this accent piece, or this lining backing piece, I can't remember what it's called, but on the exterior we added it to the bottom. We don't want to do that for this one. We are going to use the pattern measurements as to where to place it, but this is going to be sewn in the bottom. So if we added it down there, it would be an awkward placed pocket, and plus we would lose some of it. So just make note of that. Matching the sides. So we will use those pattern measurements, and then we will sew down both sides and then across the bottom to attach it to this piece. And now that we have that pocket in place, what I'll do is I'll grab out my two side pieces. Make sure you cut these mirrored. and that you have a bottom cutout for both on the outside sides so that you can box the corners. So this is the way this will look. I will go ahead and take one of those side pieces and place it directly on top. Sew down that edge with the seam lines given the pattern, and then I will top stitch as well. Like I did on the exterior, I'll just flip this piece over, leaving the seam where it is so that I can top stitch on this side piece, not on the middle piece. And while I'm top stitching, I'll kind of just keep a check on the seam, make sure it stays where it needs to, while adding like pressure and on both sides so it lays flat. Do the same thing for the other side piece. Keeping that seam underneath, go ahead and top stitch down that side to secure the side and the seam to each other. This is how this side looks, but like I said, I still have to attach that top piece. I did not show that on the other side. So you should have two of these lining top pieces, just like you had two exterior pieces. Go ahead and have it orientated the way you want, and then flip it down and sew all across there with the seam allowance given in the pattern. You can add clips if you want. I don't have the pattern instructions beside me, so I can't remember which way we're supposed to flip the seam on this. I'm going to just go ahead and leave the seam up and top stitch on it. This is how my lining looks. This is it completed now. I'll have to add the top to the other one. On the lining and the exterior right now, all I have is an SF101 equivalent, which is a medium weight interfacing. On the lining, I'm leaving that as it is. I'm not adding any other stabilizer to it. But for the exterior, I am going to choose to add foam, and then we will add a piece of Decaville Heavy, but I'll show you how I'm attaching that. Before I sewed the top piece on the lining with the zipper pocket, I wanted to talk about the key minder if you want to add one. After you cut this piece out of your fabric, then what you do is you draw a line down the middle and you fold the long edges to the middle. Then I just added a 1/2 inch swivel hook. Now the pattern's a little different on this one. The pattern tells you to go ahead and sew down both edges and then just put it together to attach it. But that's probably if you're using a vinyl. Since I'm using a cotton woven, I kind of want a little bit extra security. So I'll go ahead and fold mine wrong sides together so the seams will be together. And then I will sew down both sides across the bottom and up again to attach everything so it has just a little bit more security. So the stitching, if you do it before you fold it or after you fold it, kind of depends on what materials you're using. Since I want a little bit extra security, I'm doing mine this way. I'll just top stitch down both sides with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then I will sew across right above the hardware. If you wanted, you could also use webbing, 1 inch or 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch webbing, whatever you would like, to make this step a little bit easier. And you can change up the size too. It's whatever your preference is. But then after you have this sewn, you will place this piece here and baste it in place, and then add the top part of the bag and sew it together this way. It won't be sewn at the top of the bag. It will be sandwiched in between this top piece and the rest of the lining. So I'm just going to baste it here first. Then I'll make sure I orientate this top piece the way I want. Go ahead and sew it in place. While I was sewing this, I realized this probably answered my question about the top stitching that I had, because we wouldn't want to flip this seam down because that would cause that key minder to pop up. So we'll leave that seam up and just fold it this way. So that way the key minder is just laying really nice and flush down. It's not looking crazy. So keep your seam going up, flip your top piece up, and then sew on that top piece just to attach that seam to the top piece. Now at this step, the pattern does tell you you can add magnets to the top of the lining pieces. I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to add a little bit of extra stabilizer just behind where I attach that magnetic snap. I'll center it on this piece, and that will help have it a little bit more secure closure. Do you have to have the magnetic snap? No, you definitely don't. I think also this bag would be really pretty with a recessed zipper too, if you like making recessed zippers. But I will attach my magnet off camera, and then I will go ahead and get everything else ready, and we'll come back to do those final steps of putting everything together. I added the foam to my exterior. I went ahead and added rivets here at the top. I did like the way that looks, so it just, I think, will look better too when it has the straps attached so that it's not flipping over. On my straps, I was getting ready to start working on them, and I thought, you know, I want to add just a layer of vinyl to cover those raw edges. Where mine is woven, I just had the raw edges. I was just going to do a double fold, but then I thought, you know what, I'm just going to add that vinyl on there so I can just do a single fold and it looks nice. So let me show you how I'm doing that. If you have vinyl straps, you wouldn't need to do this, but this is just where I'm doing woven. So I just grabbed some of the extra vinyl and I wrapped it around here. I'm just going to sew 1/8 of an inch away across both edges, and then I'm going to go ahead and attach it to the bag now. I don't think it really matters so much. You could wait until the bag's finished to do it, but I think I just want to do it at this step here. Hopefully it won't cause me any problems at the end. I did decide to go ahead and do a drop-in lining on this bag because I'm using the foam. I kept the foam in the seam allowance, and I already know that I'm going to do my top stitching on my exterior. So that means I'm already going to have to turn this bag out once, so I don't want to do it twice. So I'm just going to do a drop-in. Definitely you can do it however works best for you. So now what I'm going to do is just go across this extra piece here. The more steps I do on this bag, the more I want to keep it for myself. I am going to sew whatever studio for this summit, and I just think, oh, I deserve to take a new bag with me. So this may be the bag I take. So now that I have that edge sewn on, what I'm going to do is I want, when this strap is raised up and being carried, I want it to be showing this floral print, not the print on the back. So I'm going to slip it on that way to make for sure I have the right orientation, and then just fold it one time. You'll want to make for sure that you fold it the same way on both sides so everything's even. So then I will just clip it onto here, do the same thing on the other side to make for sure it looks straight and even and I don't have it twisted. And then what I can do is I can take this over to my machine and I can just top stitch right underneath that vinyl. And I did this a while back on a bag I was making because whenever I did the double fold, it was a little thick for my machine because don't forget, I have 2 full straps here sewn together. So this just helps me have a really nice stitch without worrying about any skip stitches where I am sewing on a domestic. Go ahead and trim up your threads and then do those same steps for the other side, and then we will start putting everything together. My bag's getting quite a bit big now, so you might not be able to see everything perfectly on camera, so I'm going to try my best to show you everything the way you need to see it so that you have the best view. But what we are going to do now is we are going to sew this bag, the 2 exteriors, right sides together along this bottom edge. We're going to do this, and then we're going to open it up, butterfly that seam, and then add that heavy stabilizer. Do I need heavy stabilizer since I have this foam? Probably not, but I'm going to go ahead and add it because I think it will help that base to be really nice and secure. So let's put these 2 pieces together and sew with that seam allowance all along this bottom edge. Now that I have that bottom sewn together and I butterflied the seams and top stitched down both sides, I can take this extra piece of stabilizer. Mine is a Decaville Heavy. I can center it on here and then I can just sew around the perimeter of this. Yes, I could take it over to my press and press it flat, but the designer tells us to stitch and I kind of like that. It'll have a really nice solid stitch on it. It'll be a decorative touch too. So I'm completely okay with stitching instead of pressing it. I'm just going to stitch 1/8 of an inch away. I am going to sew it from the wrong side. If you have cut out your piece of Decaville Heavy perfectly, then you won't have any problems sewing around it without the stitches looking odd. If you didn't cut it perfectly, there definitely can be some kind of uneven stitches, but I don't think it would show very much at all. The designer does tell you could add purse feet on here, which I think would be a great touch, but I don't have any purse feet, so I'm going to skip that step. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put this right sides together to sew down my sides and to box those corners. So I will just place these on top of each other, start matching up here at the top, and I'll use my heavy duty clips. Everyone asks where I get these. I get them from Amazon. These are actually clips that you use to hang up your clothes if you use a clothesline outside, and I love them so much. I'll always have them from now on in my sewing room, but you can find them on Amazon if you just search for clips for hanging laundry. Now that I have the sides clipped together, I'm going to go ahead and sew down each side with the full seam allowance given in the pattern. Now that I have the sides sewn on this exterior, I'm going to box the corners. Your corners are pretty much going the way they want to. You can see them trying to open it up, and where we have the seam here and the seam here, it's pretty easy to know where we need to match up. So we're going to push those together. Since I am using foam, keeping it in the seam allowance, since I have that Decaville heavy at the bottom, I'm going to pull out those big clips once again. I know if I would use those small plastic ones, they would probably snap and break or just pop off. I'm going to push this part down so I can get a really nice flat stitch across these corners. Make sure that seam is stacked on top of each other, so this seam is on top of that seam on the bottom. And then I'm going to just sew across here with the seam allowance given in the pattern. So here's how that boxed corner looks. I'm going to complete those same steps on the other side of this exterior to box that corner. Then I'm going to pull out my lining. I'm going to do everything the same on the lining. I want to sew down the sides, across the bottom. I'm not going to worry about butterflying the bottom seams open because I don't feel like that's that necessary, but I will box the corners afterwards. And then I will come back to show you how we are going to finish this bag. Since I'm doing a drop-in lining, I'll just have my edges folded down and it'll just be one more top stitch and then the bag's done. I know my bag looks crazy right now, but this is the best way for me to sew it. So I do have the exterior and the lining wrong sides together because I'm just doing a drop-in lining. So all I'm going to do is sew all around here, and that will be the only row of stitching I'm doing. But my exterior is just slightly bigger than my lining because I did kind of grade my seams a little on my lining. So while it looks really awkward right now, I do believe it'll look really good at the end. So I have this clipped really well. I'm going to go slow. I'm going to be sewing from that exterior side so I'll make sure the stitches look good. So I folded down the raw edges on both the exterior and the lining, just what the seam allowance was. I didn't fold any more than that. And so now I'm just going to sew like a top stitch, just an 1/8 of an inch away all the way around. I do have my lining slightly lower than my exterior, just so it won't be showing from when I'm looking at the exterior of the bag. I'm going to go around here very slow, not rushing at all, because I really want it to look nice at the end. The top stitching went really good except this one corner here. I'm going to flip everything out. I'm going to change the angle on my camera so I can see the bag clearly. And if this looks bad, I'll redo it. Hopefully it won't though. Oh my gosh, I'm not even going to try to pretend that I'm not completely obsessed with this bag. These prints, this pattern was exactly what I needed today. This is just gorgeous. I love the colors. I love this extra little pocket here. I love the tag. I just love everything about it. This pattern is definitely going to be a pattern that I want to sew more of. I love it so much. Look at how good that lining fits. How gorgeous that is. It's very wide open. I don't think I can get rid of this bag. I think it's staying with me for sure. It's just exactly what I want. The only thing I don't 100% like is that I can see the lining from the outside, but not because I messed up. It's just the way a bag sits. You know, a bag sits like that because it's not a zipper opening. That's okay, because I do like that it's butterflies on the inside with the flower, so I'm okay with that. But this pattern is great. The Teagan Tote, I highly suggest it. I think I will be sewing it again and again. So much fun, easy to understand, easy to follow. The prints, the outside, these two coordinating prints are from My Little Shindig. This is from her subscription for March. This is the pattern she's recommending for this month, and I just love it. The pattern is from Stitches by Christy. The lining on the inside is from J&R Edwards. Of course, I have my Sewing Blurbs tags. I have the cork tag on this side. This does come with your subscription. It is a custom-made tag exactly for these prints from Heartwood and Hyde. I love everything about it. Definitely hope you guys try it too. I'm sorry that my lines aren't perfectly straight. That's a problem with me, not a problem with the material at all. But anyway, thank you for watching another one of my videos. Thank you for staying around and supporting me. I really appreciate it. And if you sew up this pattern, I would love to see it. And if you don't, I hope you can find the time to sew something beautiful in your sewing room. And I hope you have an amazing day. Thank you so much for watching.